Thank you, Nicole. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I interviewed the head of the water affairs for KwaZulu-Natal because there's an incredible amount. The Auditor General said 53% of freshwater resources in KwaZulu-Natal are literally going down the drain. It was a shocking interview. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Now, we know we have a crisis already with power and electricity. Is water our next crisis? I'm concerned. I think most people are. I have Mike Muller, who's Adjunct Professor at Wits University, available now to speak to me. Mike, tell me, are we doing enough to avert a problem with a resource that everybody tells us is very scarce in South Africa?
Omar, good evening, and to your viewers. Look, we are not doing enough. It's not quite as bad as you heard from KwaZulu-Natal. It's not 50% that's being lost altogether down the drain. Probably half of it is being taken, being used. No one's paying for it. No one's measuring it. And if you don't measure and tell people how much they're using, and preferably ask them to pay for it, they'll just use more. And that means that down the pipe, down the line, there'll be people who don't get water. And that's happening more and more in more and more municipalities. So we really do have a crisis. We're just not managing our water supply properly.
But okay, you say we're not managing our water supply properly. Everybody's learnt what happens when you don't maintain, when you don't replace on time. We're seeing it with Eskom. We go into these lockdown, blackouts, what we call load shedding, and people are really struggling. Is that what we're heading to with the water crisis, and when is that likely to hit?
Well, you know, it's already hit Cape Town. It's currently hitting Nelson Mandela Bay. And what those two places are learning is that if you don't control the use beforehand, if you don't keep people sharp, this is how much water you're using. If you're using too much, you're going to have to pay for it. And you just let the system run. Eventually it runs dry. And so what we saw in Cape Town and Port Elizabeth was entirely expected. We knew that if they didn't take action either to reduce consumption or put in new supplies, they would hit this kind of problem the moment there was a drought. And Nelson Mandela Bay is currently demonstrating just that. And there's more and more towns and cities across the country which are facing similar challenges.
But is there a reason? What are we missing in this country that we're only able to respond after a crisis hits, that we can't preempt this by doing the right things in advance? Is it a competency issue? Is it a skills issue? Can you put your finger on that?
Look, I think the main problem is politicians don't like to tell people that there's a limited amount that they can have for free, and it's a very limited amount, and if they use more, they must pay for it, and if they are going to be asked to pay for it, someone has to manage how much gets used. They've got to build them, and then they've got to collect the bill. And if people have to pay and are told how much they're using, you'll find, as Cape Town did, as what Elizabeth is doing at the moment, Kebega, they'll use less. But the municipalities find it terribly hard work to do, and the politicians in the municipalities actually find it very difficult to tell people to exert some discipline. But, you know, people would much rather have water reliably out of the taps than what's happening in Kebega, Nelson Mandela Bay at the moment, where they don't know if there's going to be water tomorrow. So they'd be prepared to exert the discipline, as they did in Cape Town. But, you know, in Cape Town, they only did it because they had to, and the same's happening at the moment in Nelson Mandela Bay.
So you know what South Africans are doing with the power crisis, right? We're all doing this privately. We're putting, if you can afford it, you're putting in inverters, you're putting in solar panels, you're doing everything else to try and avoid you falling into crisis. But of course, that's for the rich. Most of ordinary South Africans, poor South Africans, just have to bear the brunt of it. Is that what rich South Africans are going to do now? Boreholes in every home, collect water from the rain. Is that what you would advise?
Well, I'm happy to say, actually, that it's more difficult with water than with electricity. With electricity, you can buy a generator. Right. As we discovered in Johannesburg, I think it was Helen Joseph Hospital, the givers went and they drilled and they drilled and they drilled. They couldn't find water. Another hospital next door found a little bit of water, but not enough. Whether you're rich or poor, if you want a reliable source of water, you really do need, in the cities, to have a public source. Rainwater tanks are great when it rains, but for 6 months of the year, it's not going to rain. You're going to depend on that municipal supply. It's in everybody's interest. But with local government elections coming up, we have to tell the politicians, your job is to put competent people in there, tell them to do their job, and then let them do the job.
Thank you very much.
Most of my professional colleagues,
Thank you
black
very
and white,
much.
aren't allowed to do their job.
Thank you for your time, Professor Mike Muller, Adjunct Professor at Wits University, warning us that if we don't do the right things, we don't get the right disciplines in place, we're going to run into a water crisis.